Millionaire CEO calls to hire a cleaner, but a child answers, and what she says leaves him frozen. The gleaming tower of Harrison Tech pierced the Manhattan skyline like a steel needle, and on its 52nd floor, David Harrison wielded power with surgical precision. At 42, he had built an empire through calculated decisions and ruthless efficiency. His corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooked a city that bent to his will. Your performance has been consistently below standards. Johnson, David's voice cut through the silence like ice. The executive across from his mahogany desk shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading on his forehead despite the perfectly controlled temperature. Sir, if you could just give me another quarter, security will escort you out. David's green eyes never wavered from the termination papers. Margaret will handle your severance details. As Johnson's footsteps faded down the marble hallway, David's assistant Margaret appeared in the doorway, her silver hair impeccably styled despite her 60-plus years. Mr. Harrison, about the cleaning service situation. What about it? David's fingers drummed impatiently on his desk. After yesterday's incident with the previous cleaning crew, I found this commercial cleaning ad online. She placed a printed webpage before him. They seemed desperate for work. David scanned the amateur advertisement with disgust. Grammatical errors, cheap design, a phone number that redirected to what appeared to be a personal cell phone. Perfect for intimidation. Get them on the line. I want to make it clear what happens when people disappoint me. Margaret hesitated. Sir, perhaps I should. Now, Margaret. David dialed the number himself, his jaw set in familiar determination. After 3 rings, a small, fragile voice answered. Hello. The voice was so unexpected that David paused. It wasn't the harried adult he'd anticipated, but something much smaller, much more vulnerable. I'm looking for Claire Morgan, he said, his tone automatically softening despite himself. The response shattered something deep inside his chest. The child began to create deep, desperate sobs that spoke of genuine terror. Mommy can't stay awake, right? She says weird things and we don't have food for 2 days. David Harrison, the man who had fired hundreds without blinking, found himself frozen. This wasn't a business transaction gone wrong. This was a child's desperate plea for help, echoing through his phone line like a ghost from a life he'd never lived. What's your name, sweetheart? The endearment escaped before he could stop it. Lily, I'm 4, and Mommy is really, really sick. David's hand trembled as he gripped the phone, his corporate instincts warring with an unfamiliar surge of protectiveness. Through the speaker, Lily's sniffles gradually subsided into hiccuping breaths. Lily, honey, can you tell me what's wrong with your mommy? His voice had transformed into something he didn't recognize, gentle, patient, caring. She drinks lots and lots of water, but won't eat anything. Lily's voice was small, but determined. And she sleeps all day, but talks funny when she's awake. Like she's confused about everything. David's mind raced. The symptoms sounded familiar from health articles he'd skimmed, but he pushed the thought aside. Is there anyone else there? With you, grandparents, other family? No, just me and Mommy. But, Lily paused, and David could hear her moving around. Mommy has important papers in a special box with your picture from the newspaper. She said, you used to be her boss, but that you're very important and busy now. A cold chill ran down David's spine. Claire Morgan. The name suddenly crystallized in his memory. Are reports about an employee questioning procedures. Someone who'd been eliminated. Lily, what does your mommy look like? She has brown hair like me, but she's really thin now. And, Lily's voice dropped to a whisper, as if sharing a precious secret. Do you have green eyes like mine? Mommy said once that my daddy from work had eyes just like that. The phone nearly slipped from David's grip. At 20, he'd been diagnosed. With severe oligospermia, he'd likely never father children. It had shaped every relationship, every decision about his future. The possibility of being wrong, of having a daughter, hit him like a physical blow. Lily, how old are you again? 4 3/4. My birthday was in January. David's mind calculated frantically. 5 years ago, that night working late with Claire, reviewing security systems. The connection that had led to intimacy he'd immediately dismissed as a professional error. The woman he'd had terminated shortly after for being problematic. Through his office windows, Manhattan sprawled below, but suddenly none of it mattered. Somewhere in Queens, a little girl with his green eyes was caring for a sick mother, and his entire world was crumbling and rebuilding itself in the span of a heartbeat. Lily, sweetheart, I'm coming to help you and your mommy. Can you tell me your address? David slammed the phone down and bolted from his chair, his $1,000 suit jacket flying behind him. Margaret looked up in alarm as he rushed past her desk. Cancel the board meeting. Cancel everything, he barked, not slowing his stride toward the elevator. Sir, the quarterly reports handle it. The elevator doors closed on Margaret's bewildered expression. During the 40-minute drive to Queens, David's hands gripped the steering wheel as memories flooded back with painful clarity. Claire Morgan, brilliant programmer in the IT department. Terminated 5 years ago after reporting concerns about suspicious code modifications. that his security team had dismissed as paranoia. He remembered her passionate arguments about system vulnerabilities, her refusal to back down when pressured. He also remembered that night, working late to review the very systems she'd questioned, the unexpected connection when she'd stayed to help, the way her eyes had lit up when he'd actually listened to her concerns. The intimacy that followed had felt natural, inevitable, until morning brought corporate reality crashing down. Professional mistake, he'd told himself, even as he signed her termination papers a week later for being disruptive to team dynamics. The Queens neighborhood was a jarring contrast to Manhattan's gleaming towers, cracked sidewalks, buildings, with peeling paint, the kind of place David hadn't set foot in for decades. He found the address, a tired apartment building with a broken intercom. The apartment door was unlocked. David's heart lurched as he stepped inside and saw Claire collapsed on a threadbare sofa, her breathing rapid and shallow. Her once brown hair was lank against the cushions, and her skin had an unhealthy pallor that made his stomach twist with guilt. "Mommy, the man with green eyes is here." Lily's voice was bright with relief as she tugged on David's sleeve. At 4, she was tiny for her age, but his eyes sparkled with intelligence and premature wisdom. The apartment reeked of something sweet and cloying that David couldn't identify. Claire's lips moved soundlessly, her eyes unfocused and distant. When she tried to sit up, her movements were unsteady, confused. "Lily, has your mommy been like this long?" David knelt beside the sofa, his corporate training warring with paternal instincts he'd never known existed. 3 days maybe. She keeps asking for water and bathroom, but forgets where things are. Lily's small hand found his. "I tried to give her crackers, but she just pushes them away." David pulled out his phone with shaking fingers. Whatever was wrong with Claire, it was serious, and every minute counted. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance at 847 Maple Street, Queens. A woman is semi-conscious with rapid breathing and severe confusion. David's voice was steady, but his free hand trembled as he felt Claire's forehead burning hot despite her shivering. "Is she responsive, sir?" David gently shook Claire's shoulder. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "Claire, can you hear me?" She mumbled something incoherent, her breathing coming in quick, shallow gasps. Lily pressed closer to David's side, her small fingers clutching his shirt. "She's barely responsive. Breathing is very fast, and she's been like this for days," according to her daughter. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, but it felt like hours. As they loaded Claire onto a stretcher, David scooped Lily into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and big eyes, in a face too serious for a 4-year-old at Queens General Hospital. Dr. Martinez emerged from the emergency room with grave concern etched on his weathered face. "Are you family?" David's throat tightened. "I'm her employer. This is her daughter. She has latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. It's essentially type 1 diabetes with a slower onset. Her blood sugar is dangerously high, and she's in diabetic ketoacidosis. Without treatment." The doctor's words faded as David processed the implications. Lily tugged on his sleeve, and he lifted her to eye level. "The doctor says Mommy is very sick, but they can help her, right?" Her green eyes, so heartbreakingly like his own, searched his face for reassurance. "That's right, sweetheart. She's going to be okay." David surprised himself with how natural the comfort felt. As they waited, Lily began talking with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Mummy works at the call center during the day, but they don't pay much because nobody wants to hire her for computer work anymore. She cleans offices at night while I sleep. Mrs. Chen from next door checks on me sometimes." David's chest constricted with each revelation. "How long has your mommy been tired and confused?" "Maybe 2 weeks. She said it was just stress from working so much, but she kept getting thinner and drinking water all the time. Yesterday, she couldn't remember where the bathroom was." The weight of his role in Claire's circumstances crushed down on him. Blacklisted from IT work because of his termination, forced into low-paying jobs, struggling alone while developing a serious medical condition she couldn't afford to diagnose. "Lily, has your mommy ever talked about me before today?" Lily nodded. Solemnly, she said you were very smart but sometimes forgot that people have feelings. But she also said you weren't all bad, just lost. Lost. The word hit harder than any corporate insult ever had. While Claire stabilized in the ICU, David made a call that would change everything. "Margaret, I need the personnel files for Claire Morgan. Everything from her employment and termination." "Sir, those records are 5 years old. Now, Margaret." An hour later, David sat in the hospital waiting room with a manila folder that felt heavier than his entire corporate empire. Claire's employment record painted a damning picture. Stellar performance reviews, innovative security recommendations, and then a sudden shift after she'd reported irregular code modifications. In the company's financial software, the irregularities she'd identified were the same ones that federal auditors had discovered 2 years later, costing Harrison Tech $40 million in fines and penalties. Claire Morgan had been right about everything. "Mr. Harrison, Margaret's voice was cautious through the phone. There's something else. About 6 months after Ms. Morgan's termination, someone called repeatedly asking to speak with you. The calls were from a Claire Morgan. David's jaw clenched. What happened to those calls? Per your standing instructions about former employees, I had them blocked. She sounded desperate. Sir? David ended the call and stared at Lily, who was coloring in a hospital activity book with intense concentration. Her tongue poked out slightly as she worked the same expression he made when reviewing complex contracts. Lily, can I ask you something? She looked up, crayon poised in midair. Sure. What's your birthday? January 15th. I'm gonna be 5 next time. David's hands went cold. 9 months after that night with Claire. The timing was perfect. Undeniable. Do you know anything about your daddy? Lily's face grew thoughtful. Mommy says he's very busy and important, but that he has a good heart underneath. She showed me his picture in newspapers sometimes. She said maybe someday when I'm older, we might meet him, but only if he wanted to. David excused himself and walked to the hospital's genetic testing lab. Within hours, he had hair samples from Lily's coloring session and his own DNA swab submitted for expedited paternal testing. But deep down, he already knew. The green eyes were just the beginning. Lily had his stubborn chin, the same small scar on her left eyebrow from a childhood accident, even the way she tilted her head when thinking. By evening, the test results confirmed what his heart had accepted hours earlier. 99.97% probability of paternity. David Harrison, who had built an empire on calculated risks and cold logic, found himself staring at a sleeping 4-year-old and realizing he'd been living half a life. Everything he'd thought mattered, board meetings, profit margins, corporate dominance suddenly seemed as fragile as smoke. Asterisk, he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. His coup. I'm promoting you to CEO, effective immediately. I'll retain the chairman position, but you're running day-to-day operations. David, what's going on? I just discovered I have a daughter, Marcus, and I have 4 years of fatherhood to make up. For Claire awakened after 48 hours of intensive treatment, her eyes immediately scanning the ICU with the panicked alertness of a mother separated from her child. When she spotted David sitting beside Lily's makeshift bed of hospital chairs, her face transformed from relief to defensive fury. What are you doing here? Her voice was hoarse but sharp. Where's my daughter? Mommy. Lily scrambled from David's lap and rushed to the bedside. The man with green eyes helped us. He called the ambulance and stayed with me the whole time. Claire's eyes locked with David's over Lily's head, and the recognition hit like a physical blow. 5 years melted away in an instant. The late nights, the connection, the betrayal, the termination that had destroyed her career. The word carried the weight of years of struggle. David stood slowly, his usual corporate confidence replaced by something raw and uncertain. Claire, I get out. Her voice was deadly quiet. Whatever game this is, whatever corporate PR stunt, it's not a game. David's voice broke slightly. The irregularities you reported 5 years ago. You were right about everything. The company paid $40 million in federal fines because I was too arrogant to listen. Claire's facade wavered for just a moment before snapping back into place. So what? You feel guilty now? I feel like an idiot. And a father. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they could cross. Lily looked back and forth between the adults, her young mind processing tensions she couldn't fully understand. Mommy, he brought me chocolate milk and helped me with my coloring. And he told the doctors to make you all better. Claire's defensive walls showed the first hairline cracks. Lily, sweetheart, can you sit in that chair for a minute? Mommy needs to talk to you. To David, when Lily was out of earshot, Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. I tried to call you. When I found out I was pregnant, when she was born, when we were evicted from our first apartment. David's throat constricted. Margaret told me I had all calls from former employees blocked. I was so focused on protecting the company image that you destroyed lives to maintain your precious reputation. Yes, the admission came out raw and honest. But I want to make this right. Claire, I want to help. I want to know my daughter. Claire studied his face, searching for the corporate manipulation she expected to find. Instead, she saw something she'd never seen in David Harrison before. Genuine vulnerability. Help, how? Write a check and disappear. Because that's not happening. Whatever you need, medical bills, living expenses, education. I want to be part of Lily's life, and yours if you'll let me. Claire was quiet for a long moment, watching Lily hum softly while coloring. I won't let you buy us, David, and I won't let you hurt her. When you get bored of playing father, I'm not playing. David's voice was steadier now. I just found out I have a daughter. I'm not going anywhere. 3 weeks into their tentative routine, David had begun to believe they might actually build something resembling a family. Claire's diabetes was well controlled with proper medication and nutrition, and Lily was thriving with consistent meals and bedtime stories. Then everything shattered in an instant. David was reading Charlotte's Web to Lily in Claire's small living room when the little girl suddenly went pale and slumped against him, her eyes rolling back. Lily, David caught her as she collapsed, her small body going limp. Claire rushed from the kitchen, took one look at her unconscious daughter, and her face went white. Call 911 now. The ambulance ride to Mount Sinai Children's Hospital was a blur of sirens and frantic medical terminology. Lily drifted in and out of consciousness while paramedics checked her blood sugar completely normal, which only deepened the mystery. Dr. Sarah Peterson, the pediatric endocrinologist, emerged from the emergency room with a gravity that made David's stomach drop. We need to talk, all of us. In a small consultation room, Dr. Peterson spread test results across the table like a hand of cards that would determine their future. Lily has moody maturity onset diabetes of the young, but it's complicated by juvenile autoimmune pancreatitis. Claire gripped David's hand. Unconsciously, what does that mean? MODY is a rare genetic form of diabetes. But in Lily's case, her immune system is also attacking her pancreas directly. It's destroying the cells that produce insulin at an accelerated rate. David felt the room spinning slightly. How do we treat it? Currently, medication and careful monitoring. But Dr. Peterson's pause felt like an eternity. If the autoimmune component continues at this pace, Lily may need an islet cell transplant within the next year. Her pancreas is essentially destroying itself. A transplant. Claire's voice was barely a whisper. We would transplant healthy insulin-producing cells from a donor. It's a newer procedure, but it can be life-saving when medication fails. David was already calculating costs, resources, the best specialists money could buy. What do we need to do? Who are the best surgeons? What are the success rates? Dr. Peterson looked at him with professional compassion. Mr. Harrison, the biggest challenge isn't finding surgeons. It's finding a compatible donor. Islet cell transplants require very specific genetic matching, usually from a close relative. The words hit David like a physical blow. He thought of his own medical history, the oligospermia diagnosis that had shaped his entire adult life. What about genetic testing? For compatibility, we'll test both parents. Of course, but given the rarity of Lily's specific condition and the genetic markers involved, Dr. Peterson's voice trailed off diplomatically. Claire was crying quietly now. The weight of another medical crisis, this one potentially terminal, crushing down on her. David pulled both his girls closer, his mind racing through possibilities, resources, connections. But for the first time in his corporate life, money and influence felt utterly inadequate against the cruel mathematics of genetic compatibility and time. How long do we have? He asked quietly. Hard to say. Could be months, could be a year. We'll monitor closely. As they held Lily's sleeping form between them that night, David realized that saving his daughter might require more than his wealth. It might require his very DNA. The genetic testing results arrived on a great Thursday morning that would forever divide David's life into before and after. Dr. Peterson called them into her office with an expression that immediately set off alarm bells. The family genetic panel has revealed some unexpected findings. She began, spreading laboratory reports across her desk like evidence in a trial. Claire, you're a carrier for the MODY mutation, but it's remained dormant in you. However, David, she paused, studying his file with intense focus. Your genetic markers are fascinating. You carry different mutations that, when combined with Claire's, created Lily's specific condition. But there's something else. David leaned forward, his businessman's instinct sensing crucial information. What kind of something else? I took the liberty of reviewing your original medical records from 20 years ago. The oligospermia diagnosis that shaped your understanding of your fertility. Dr. Peterson looked up with professional gravity. Mr. Harrison, you were misdiagnosed. The words hit David like a physical blow. What do you mean, misdiagnosed? Dr. Marcus Webb, who treated you, lost his medical license 3 years ago for multiple cases of diagnostic negligence. Your sperm count was never severely compromised. It was slightly below average, which often improves with age. The fertility issues you believed to find you were largely imaginary. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You mean David could have had children all along? Not only that, Dr. Peterson continued, but David has mild chronic pancreatitis that went undiagnosed. It's the same genetic foundation that's causing Lily's condition. This makes his pancreatic cells potentially compatible for transplant. The room spun around David as 20 years of self-imposed isolation crashed down. Every relationship he'd avoided, every family he'd never built, all because of one incompetent doctor's false diagnosis. Are you saying I could be Lily's donor? His voice was barely a whisper. Asterisk, the preliminary markers suggest strong compatibility. We'll need more comprehensive testing, but David, you might be the best possible match for your daughter. Claire was crying now, tears of relief mixed with fury at the years of unnecessary suffering. All this time, you thought you couldn't have children. David nodded, unable to speak. The weight of discovering he had a daughter was crushing enough, but learning that he could have had a family all along, that his entire adult life had been built on a lie, was almost unbearable. "There's more," Dr. Peterson said gently. "The same genetic markers that Webb misinterpreted as fertility problems are precisely what make you compatible with Lily. In a strange way, the condition that you thought prevented you from being a father is exactly what might save your daughter's life." David stared at the test results, seeing his life rewritten in columns of numbers and genetic codes. The man who had built an empire on information and data had been living a fundamental lie about his own biology for 2 decades. "So I could save her?" he asked quietly. "Potentially, yes. But David, you need to understand, donating islet cells isn't without risk. You could develop severe pancreatitis temporarily, and there's no guarantee Lily's body won't reject the transplant." David looked at Lily, who was coloring quietly in the corner, blissfully unaware that her father's DNA held the key to her survival. David threw himself into medical research with the same ruthless efficiency that had built his corporate empire. His Manhattan penthouse transformed overnight into a command center filled with medical journals, specialist consultations, and cutting-edge equipment. Sleep became optional. Lily's survival became his only priority. "Marcus, I need you to handle the quarterly board meeting," David said into his phone while simultaneously reading a study on islet cell transplant success rates, "and cancel my trip to Singapore indefinitely." "David, the investors are getting nervous about your absence. From then make them less nervous. That's why I promoted you." David's tone brooked no argument. "My daughter needs me." The word daughter still felt foreign on his tongue, but increasingly natural in his heart. Every day brought new discoveries about Lily: her love of dinosaurs, her habit of talking to stuffed animals like they were real, the way she hummed while coloring that reminded him achingly of Claire. Meanwhile, Claire struggled with her own demons. Watching David's transformation from corporate tyrant to devoted father was bewildering and terrifying in equal measure. "You can't just restructure your entire life around us," she said one evening as David assembled a specialized glucose monitoring system in their apartment. "What happens when the novelty wears off?" David looked up from the medical equipment, his hands steady despite the exhaustion lining his face. "Claire, I've spent 20 years believing I was incapable of being a father. Now I find out I not only have a daughter, but I might be the only person who can save her life. This isn't novelty, this is purpose." Their tentative co-parenting dance was complicated by David's controlling instincts. When Lily's morning glucose reading was slightly elevated, he immediately called Dr. Peterson. When Claire suggested a different bedtime routine, David researched sleep patterns in diabetic children. "David, you're not her doctor," Claire snapped after he questioned her lunch choices for Lily. "You're her father. There's a difference." The word stung because it was true. David was approaching fatherhood like a hostile corporate takeover: overwhelming force, maximum resources, complete control. But Lily wasn't a business problem to be solved. She was a little girl who needed love, not just medical management. That revelation came during a seemingly ordinary Saturday morning. David arrived at Claire's apartment armed with educational toys, organic snacks, and a detailed schedule for optimal child development. Instead, Lily grabbed his hand and pulled him to her blanket fort in the living room. "Daddy, look, I made us a secret castle." The simple joy in her voice, the way she called him daddy so naturally, stopped David cold. Inside the fort, surrounded by pillows and stuffed animals, Lily showed him her drawing stick figures labeled Mommy, Daddy, and me holding hands under a rainbow. "We're a family now, right?" Lily asked, her green eyes bright with hope. David felt something crack open in his chest. "Yes, sweetheart, we're a family." For the first time in his adult life, David forgot about efficiency and optimization. They spent 3 hours in the blanket fort, playing pretend tea parties and reading picture books. Claire watched from the kitchen doorway, seeing glimpses of the man she'd connected with 5 years ago, before corporate armor had sealed him away from human connection. But beneath the growing familial bonds, the medical reality lurked like a shadow. Lily's latest tests showed continued pancreatic deterioration despite aggressive treatment. Dr. Peterson's words echoed constantly. Could be months, could be a year. That night, after Lily fell asleep between them on the couch, Claire finally voiced what they were both thinking. "The transplant," she whispered. "When do we have to decide?" David's arm tightened around both his girls. "When her medication stops working, when we have no other choice. And if something goes wrong, if I lose both of you." David turned to face her in the dim light. "Claire, I've already lost 20 years of being a father. I won't lose our daughter now." The intensity of Lily's medical care began fracturing the fragile family unit they were building. What started as collaborative concerns slowly morphed into a power struggle between two people who had never learned to share control. "Her glucose was 180 this morning," David announced as he entered Claire's apartment, medical supply bag in hand. "Dr. Peterson wants us to adjust her pre-breakfast insulin by 2 units. Claire looked up from helping Lily with her cereal, irritation flashing across her face. I know, David. I was the one who called the doctor, right? But I've been researching optimal timing for insulin administration, and if we move breakfast, 15 minutes later, David, Claire's voice held a warning. She's not a medical experiment. She's a 4-year-old who wants to eat her Lucky Charms without someone hovering over her with a spreadsheet. Lily looked between her parents with the uncomfortable awareness that children develop when adults fight about them. She'd started hiding things, not finishing all her juice when glucose was high, not mentioning when she felt dizzy, anything to avoid causing more important grown-up talks. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when David arrived with a certified diabetes educator in a 3-page daily management protocol he'd developed. This is ridiculous, Claire exploded after the educator left. You've turned our home into a medical facility. Lily can't even play without you timing her activity periods. Her health requires precision. Claire, I'm trying to optimize. She's not a business merger. Claire's voice rose dangerously. You waltz in here after 4 years with your checkbook and your medical experts, and suddenly you're the expert on our daughter. Our daughter. David's control finally snapped. Was this protective instinct when she was living on cereal and juice boxes because you couldn't afford real food? When she was caring for you during diabetic episodes because you were too proud to seek help? The words hung in the air like poison. Claire's face went white, then red with fury. Get out. Her voice was deadly quiet. Get out of my apartment and stay away from us. Claire, I didn't mean you meant every word. You think money makes you a better parent. That for weeks of reading medical journals gives you more authority than 4 years of keeping her alive on my own. Lily began crying from her bedroom, the raised voices terrifying her in a way that medical procedures never had. David moved toward her room, but Claire blocked his path. I said, get out. I'll pack our things tomorrow. We're leaving New York. You can't take her away from me. I have parental rights. Rights? Claire laughed bitterly. You have a DNA test and a guilty conscience. I have 4 years of 3 a.m. emergency room visits, teacher conferences, and bedtime stories. Don't you dare talk to me about rights. David stood frozen as Claire's words hit their target. She was right. He had been trying to buy his way into fatherhood, treating Lily's care like a corporate problem that superior resources could solve. Claire, please. I know I've been controlling. David, you've been suffocating. Lily started hiding symptoms last week because she's afraid our fights are her fault. She's 4 years old and she thinks she has to be perfect or her parents will stop loving each other. The revelation hit David like a physical blow. His efficiency-driven approach wasn't helping Lily, it was hurting her. The daughter he was desperately trying to save was sacrificing her own well-being to keep peace between the adults who were supposed to protect her. What do you want me to do? His voice was quiet now, defeated. I want you to be her father, not her medical manager. I want you to trust that I've kept her alive this long and might actually know what I'm doing. From the bedroom came Lily's small voice. Mommy, Daddy, did I do something wrong? Both parents looked toward her room, the sound of their daughter's fear cutting through their anger like a blade. Whatever issues existed between them, Lily's emotional well-being had to come first. No, baby, Claire called out, her voice gentle, despite her tears. You didn't do anything wrong. Mommy and Daddy just need to learn how to work together better. David looked at Claire with new understanding. Teach me, he said quietly. Please, I don't know how to be a father, but I want to learn. 2 weeks after their explosive fight, David approached parenting with new humility. Instead of arriving with medical equipment and protocols, he came with simple gifts, crayons, picture books, and genuine interest in Lily's world. The change in family dynamics was remarkable, but their fragile peace was about to be shattered by a discovery that would rewrite everything they thought they knew. Dr. Peterson called on a Friday afternoon, her voice carrying an urgency that immediately set David's nerves on edge. I need you both to come in immediately. We've discovered something critical about David's medical history. The drive to Mount Sinai felt eternal. Claire gripped David's hand, the first time she'd voluntarily touched him since their fight, while Lily chatted obliviously in the back seat about her upcoming kindergarten placement. What kind of discovery? David asked as they settled into Dr. Peterson's office. Is it about the transplant compatibility? Dr. Peterson spread a thick file across her desk, her expression grim. David, I've been conducting a forensic review of your original medical records from Dr. Marcus Webb. What I found goes far beyond simple misdiagnosis. She pulled out a series of documents, test results spanning 20 years. Webb wasn't just incompetent, he was deliberately falsifying diagnoses to cover up his mistakes. Your oligospermia diagnosis was completely fabricated. Claire leaned forward. What do you mean fabricated? Dr. Webb was facing multiple malpractice suits 20 years ago. He was falsifying test results and diagnoses to hide his incompetence. David, your fertility was never compromised at all. Webb created the oligospermia diagnosis to explain away his failure to identify your actual condition. David felt the room tilting. My actual condition? You have a rare genetic variant called pancreatic beta cell hyperfunction. Instead of infertility, you actually have enhanced fertility. Your body produces more viable sperm than average. But, more importantly, this condition is exactly what makes you the perfect donor for Lily. The silence stretched like a held breath. David stared at the medical reports, his entire adult identity crumbling and reforming in real time. You're telling me that for 20 years, I believed I was infertile because of a lie. Not just any lie, Dr. Peterson continued. The same genetic condition Webb tried to hide by falsifying your fertility tests is precisely what can save Lily's life. Your pancreatic beta cells are hyperactive. They produce insulin more efficiently than normal. When transplanted, they could completely restore Lily's pancreatic function. Claire was crying now, overwhelmed by the cosmic injustice of it all. So David spent 2 decades avoiding relationships and family because he thought he was infertile, when he was actually more fertile than most men, and the condition that Webb covered up is the exact thing that makes him Lily's perfect donor. Dr. Peterson confirmed. The irony is almost cruel. David's ability to save his daughter stems from the same biology that a corrupt doctor convinced him was defective. David stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Manhattan sprawled below. The same view he'd commanded from his office tower, but everything looked different now. How many other people did Webb destroy with false diagnoses? His license was revoked after 17 confirmed cases of diagnostic fraud. Families torn apart, lives rebuilt on medical lies, people who made major life decisions based on fabricated test results. Lily, who had been quietly coloring, looked up with the intuitive awareness children possess. "Daddy, why are you sad? Did the doctor say something bad about my pancreas?" David knelt beside her chair, his voice thick with emotion. "No, sweetheart. The doctor said something very good about my pancreas. It turns out Daddy might be able to help make you completely better. Really, you can fix my diabetes." "Maybe, Lily, but it means Daddy would have to have a surgery too, and we'd both need to be very brave." Lily considered this with 4-year-old seriousness. "Would it hurt?" "A little bit. But if it works, you might never need insulin shots again." David's eyes brightened with hope. "And then I could eat birthday cake whenever I want." "Despite everything," David laughed. "Well, maybe not whenever you want. But yes, you could eat birthday cake like other kids." Dr. Peterson cleared her throat gently. "There's one more thing. The hyperfunction condition means David's donor cells would be incredibly robust, much more likely to successfully integrate and function long-term. This isn't just compatibility, it's optimal compatibility." Claire wiped her tears, looking between David and Lily. "When would we do the surgery?" "Lily's pancreatic function is declining faster than we hoped. I'd recommend scheduling within the next month, before her body completely stops producing insulin on its own." David reached for both his girls, pulling them close. 20 years of believing he was broken, only to discover that his supposed defect was actually a gift that could save the daughter he'd never known he could have. "Then we do it," he said quietly. "Whatever the risks, we do it." 3 weeks before the scheduled surgery, Lily's condition took a terrifying turn for the worse. David received the call at 2 a.m. Claire's voice shaking with panic. "Her glucose is over 400 and won't come down. The insulin isn't working anymore." By the time David reached the emergency room, Lily was unconscious, her small body overwhelmed by diabetic ketoacidosis. Dr. Peterson met them with grave news. "Her pancreas has essentially stopped functioning. We're looking at complete insulin dependence, and even maximum doses aren't maintaining stable levels. We need to move the transplant surgery up immediately." "How immediately?" David asked, though he already knew the answer would terrify him. "Tomorrow morning. Lily's body is rejecting all forms of external insulin regulation. Without the transplant, we're looking at multiple organ failure within days." Claire collapsed into a chair, the weight of nearly losing her daughter crushing down on her. "What are the risks?" With the surgery being rushed, Dr. Peterson's expression was carefully neutral. "For Lily, the risks remain the same possible: rejection, infection, or surgical complications. But David, operating on such short notice means we can't do the usual pre-surgical optimization. Your recovery will be more difficult, and there's a 15% chance of severe pancreatitis that could require emergency intervention." David didn't hesitate. "When do we start?" "David," Claire grabbed his arm. 15% chance means 85% chance I'll be fine, and 100% chance our daughter dies without this surgery." David's voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. "There's no choice here." Claire, that night, as Lily slept fitfully between them in the hospital bed, David and Claire had the most honest conversation of their lives. "I'm terrified," Claire whispered. "What if I lose both of you?" "You won't lose either of us." David's arm tightened around his family. "But Claire, if something does go wrong with my surgery, don't. Listen to me. I've already arranged everything. Marcus has full control of the company, but there's a trust fund for Lily's education and medical care. You'll never have to worry about money again." Claire turned to face him in the dim hospital lighting. I don't want your money, David. I want you to survive this surgery and be Lily's father for the next 60 years. Asterisk, I want that too. More than I've ever wanted anything. David's voice broke slightly. But if I don't make it, promise me you'll tell her stories about us, about how we found each other through that phone call, about how much I loved her from the moment I heard her voice. They spent the remaining hours creating a memory vault. David recording bedtime stories for Lily, writing letters for future birthdays, documenting inside jokes and favorite games. Claire filmed him explaining how to braid hair and check for monsters under the bed, all the father-daughter rituals he might miss. At dawn, Dr. Peterson arrived with the surgical team. The transplant would take place in adjacent operating rooms. David's islet cells would be harvested and immediately transplanted into Lily's pancreas. Daddy, will it hurt? Lily asked as they wheeled her toward surgery. Despite everything, her primary concern was his well-being. A little bit, sweetheart. But every time it hurts, I'll think about how brave you are, and that will make me braver too. Promise you'll be there when I wake up. David kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, memorizing the feeling of her small hand in his. I promise, Lily, Daddy will always come back to you. As they separated into different operating rooms, Claire squeezed David's hand one final time. I love you, she whispered. I think I've loved you since that night, 5 years ago, and I definitely love you now. The words he'd never been brave enough to say came easily now, with everything on the line. I love you too, Claire, both of you. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. The anesthesia took hold as David watched the surgical lights blur overhead. His last conscious thought focused on a 4-year-old girl with green eyes who had called him back to life with a single desperate phone call. In the next room, Lily drifted off to sleep, clutching a stuffed elephant David had bought her, whispering, "Take care of my daddy, Mr. Elephant, bring him back safe." The fate of their small, unlikely family now rested in the hands of surgeons and the mysterious mathematics of biological compatibility. The surgery lasted 8 grueling hours. Claire paced the waiting room like a caged animal, alternately praying to a god she wasn't sure she believed in and bargaining with the universe for the lives of the two people who had become her entire world. Dr. Peterson emerged first, still in surgical scrubs, her expression carefully controlled. The transplant itself was technically perfect. David's islet cells integrated beautifully with Lily's pancreas, and she's already showing signs of natural insulin production. Claire's knees nearly buckled with relief, and the pause that followed stretched like an eternity. David developed severe postoperative pancreatitis, as we feared. He's in critical condition. The next 48 hours will determine whether his body can recover from the trauma of the surgery. Can I see them? Lily is awake and asking for both of you. David is sedated, but you can sit with him. Claire found Lily first, propped up in a pediatric ICU bed with more color in her cheeks than she'd had in months. Mommy, the doctor says my pancreas is working like other kids now. That's right, baby. Claire hugged her daughter carefully, avoiding the surgical sites. Daddy gave you some of his healthy cells to help fix yours. Where is Daddy? I want to thank him. Claire's throat tightened. Daddy is very tired from the surgery, sweetheart. He's sleeping so his body can get better. But he's okay, right? He promised he'd be here when I woke up. Before Claire could answer, Dr. Peterson appeared with concerning news. Claire, we need to talk about David's condition. They stepped into the hallway where Lily couldn't overhear. His pancreatitis is more severe than we anticipated. His blood pressure is unstable, and his kidneys are showing signs of stress. If he doesn't respond to treatment in the next 24 hours, he could die. Claire finished numbly. I'm sorry, we're doing everything we can. Claire spent the next week living between 2 hospital rooms, sitting with Lily during the day, watching her daughter thrive with her newly functional pancreas, then spending nights holding vigil beside David's unconscious form. By day 5, David's condition had deteriorated. Further, his face was gray with pain even in sedation, and machines monitored every vital function. Claire held his hand and whispered everything she should have said years ago. Lily drew you a picture today. It's a family portrait with all of us at the beach. She's never been to a beach, David, but she wants to go with you when you wake up. Her voice broke. You have to wake up. She needs her father, and I need you too. On day 7, as Claire dozed in the uncomfortable bedside chair, she felt David's hand squeeze hers weakly. Her eyes flew open to find his green eyes, Lily's eyes focused on her face. Claire. His voice was barely a whisper. David. Oh my God, you're awake. Let me get the doctor. Wait. His grip on her hand strengthened slightly. Lily, she's perfect. The transplant worked completely. Her blood sugar has been normal for a week. David, you saved her. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. She's really okay. She's been asking for you every day. She drew you pictures and made up songs about brave daddies who fight monsters inside their bodies. David tried to smile, but winced with pain. I want to see her. Let me get Dr. Peterson first. You've been unconscious for 7 days. We almost lost you twice." When Lily was finally allowed to visit, she tiptoed into David's ICU room with the reverence of entering a church. "Daddy, are you all better now?" David's voice was hoarse but filled with wonder. "I'm getting better, sweetheart. But more importantly, how do you feel?" "I feel like a regular kid. I ate a whole cookie yesterday and my numbers stayed perfect. Dr. Peterson says I might not need insulin anymore ever." "That's the best news I've ever heard." David reached out weakly, and Lily carefully climbed onto the hospital bed beside him. "Daddy, I was really scared you wouldn't wake up." Mommy cried a lot, even though she tried to hide it. David looked at Claire over Lily's head, seeing the exhaustion and fear she'd carried alone for a week. "I'm sorry I scared you both. But I promised I'd always come back to you, and I meant it. Mommy says we're a real family now. Is that true?" David's heart clenched with the beautiful simplicity of his daughter's question. "Yes, Lily, we're a real family, forever." As they lay together in the narrow hospital bed, David weak but alive, Lily healthy for the first time in her life, and Claire, finally allowing herself to believe they might actually have a future, the magnitude of their journey hit them all. At once, a desperate phone call about cleaning services had led to the discovery of a daughter, the revelation of 20 years of medical lies, and ultimately the literal sharing of life itself between father and child. 4 months after the transplant, David stood in the kitchen of their new Westchester home, fumbling with pancake batter while Lily giggled at his culinary incompetence. The man who once commanded boardrooms with surgical precision couldn't master the simple art of Sunday breakfast. "Daddy, you're supposed to mix it gently, not like you're angry at it," Lily instructed from her perch on the counter, her glucose monitor displaying perfect numbers for the 47th consecutive day. "I think your father approaches everything like a hostile takeover." Claire laughed, appearing in the doorway with her laptop. She'd been up since dawn, working on her first freelance programming contract in 5 years, a project David had helped her secure, not through his connections, but by simply believing in her abilities again. The transformation in their lives was so complete, it sometimes felt surreal. David had officially stepped back from day-to-day operations at Harrison Tech, maintaining only his chairman role and attending board meetings twice monthly. Marcus had proven himself capable of running the company, giving David something he'd never thought possible: time. "Marcus called this morning," David said, finally achieving pancake-like consistency in his batter. "The Q3 numbers are exceptional. Turns out the company runs better when I'm not micromanaging every decision." "Shocking," Claire teased, but her smile held genuine affection. The early weeks of recovery had been challenging in ways none of them anticipated. David's residual pancreatitis required careful dietary management and regular medical monitoring. He'd lost 30 pounds, and much of his corporate swagger, replaced by something softer but infinitely more valuable: genuine happiness. "Daddy, tell me again about the old you," Lily requested, as she did most Sunday mornings. This had become their ritual: David sharing stories of his pre-fatherhood life, helping her understand the man he'd been versus the father he was becoming. "Well, the old me worked all the time and thought money was the most important thing in the world. He wore expensive suits and scared people in meetings. Was he mean?" David considered this carefully. Lily's questions always cut straight to the heart of things. "Not mean exactly, but cold. He forgot that other people had feelings because he tried so hard not to have feelings himself." "Why didn't he want feelings?" "Because feelings can hurt sometimes, and the old me thought it was safer to not feel anything at all. But he was wrong." Claire watched this exchange from the doorway, marveling at David's ability to explain complex emotional concepts to a 40-year-old. The man who once fired employees without blinking was patiently teaching their daughter about vulnerability and growth. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully. The crisis of near loss had stripped away pretenses, but building trust required daily conscious choices. David attended therapy twice weekly, working through decades of emotional armor. Claire was learning to accept help without feeling diminished, and together they were figuring out how to be partners rather than adversaries. "The family therapist called yesterday," Claire mentioned as David flipped pancakes with increasing confidence. "She wants to schedule our next session. Dr. Williams thinks we're making remarkable progress," David replied. "Apparently, most couples don't go from strangers to co-parents to potential life partners while managing a medical crisis. We're an interesting case study." "Lucky us," Claire laughed. The therapy sessions had been revelatory. David discovered that his controlling tendencies stemmed from childhood feelings of powerlessness, while Claire realized her fierce independence was partially rooted in fear of abandonment. Together, they were learning to create space for each other's healing while building something new. Lily's recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. Her pancreas had not only accepted David's donated islet cells, but was functioning better than normal. Dr. Peterson called it the most successful pediatric islet transplant she'd ever supervised. Lily's glucose levels remained stable without insulin, and she was thriving in her new kindergarten. "Mommy, can we plant flowers in the garden today?" Lily asked. syrup-sticky fingers reaching for Claire's hand. Of course, baby, what kind of flowers do you want? Sunflowers, big tall ones that can see over the fence so they can wave at the neighbors. David smiled at his daughter's logic. Everything in Lily's world was animated with personality and purpose. Through her eyes, flowers waved, clouds had moods, and stuffed animals required bedtime stories of their own. Speaking of neighbors, Claire said, Mrs. Rodriguez invited us to their barbecue next Saturday. Her grandson is starting kindergarten, too. David nodded, still adjusting to the concept of neighborhood social obligations. His Manhattan penthouse had been deliberately isolated, no neighbors, no community ties, no messy human connections. This suburban life, with its impromptu conversations over garden fences and playdates arranged through school pickup lines, was foreign territory. But watching Lily blossom in this environment made every awkward social interaction worthwhile. She had friends now, real friends who came over for birthday parties and sleepover adventures. David had never imagined how much joy he could derive from assembling a jungle gym or chaperoning a field trip to the zoo. Daddy, when I grow up, will I be able to help other kids like you helped me? Lily's question came out of nowhere, as her most profound observations often did. David knelt to her eye level, pancake turner still in hand. What do you mean, sweetheart? Well, you gave me part of your pancreas so I could be healthy. When I'm big, can I give parts of me to help other kids who are sick? Claire's eyes filled with tears at their daughter's instinctive generosity. David felt his throat tighten with emotion. That's a beautiful thought, Lily. There are lots of ways to help people when you grow up. You could be a doctor, or a teacher, or find other ways to make the world better. I think I want to be a daddy someone who helps kids and their daddies, both. David laughed. Wiping his eyes with his sleeve, a daddy doctor sounds perfect. As they sat down to breakfast, slightly lopsided pancakes, fresh strawberries from their garden, and orange juice in glasses that didn't match, David reflected on the beautiful, ordinary chaos of family life. 6 months ago, his biggest concerns had been quarterly profit margins and hostile takeover bids. Now his world revolved around bedtime stories, scraped knees, and the simple miracle of watching his daughter grow up healthy and happy. I love our weird little family, Lily announced, chocolate chip pancake crumbs decorating her smile. Me too, baby, Claire agreed, reaching across the table to squeeze David's hand. Me too. 1 year and 3 days after the transplant surgery, David stood in their backyard garden, watching Lily chase butterflies with the boundless energy of a completely healthy child. The afternoon sun painted everything gold in the sunflowers she'd insisted on planting. The wooden swing set he'd assembled with only minimal cursing, and most importantly, his daughter's face, as she laughed with pure, uncomplicated joy. Look, I caught one. Lily cupped her hands carefully, peering through her fingers at a captured monarch butterfly. Remember what we talked about, sweetheart, David said gently, kneeling beside her. What do beautiful things need to be there? Most beautiful. Lily's face scrunched in concentration, then brightened with understanding. Freedom. She opened her hands, watching the butterfly spiral upward, toward the clouds. Bye, butterfly. Thanks for playing with me. Claire emerged from the house, carrying a pitcher of lemonade and wearing the sundress David had bought her for no reason, except that it made her smile. In the year since their crisis, she'd gained weight and confidence in equal measure. Her programming freelance business was thriving, and more importantly, she was learning to accept joy without constantly bracing for the next catastrophe. The guests should start arriving soon, she said, settling onto the picnic blanket they'd spread beneath the oak tree. Are you ready for your first official family barbecue as a suburban dad? David laughed, still amazed at how natural that identity felt now. Marcus is bringing his kids, which means I'll finally meet the infamous 7-year-old who apparently thinks CEOs are boring adults who wear uncomfortable clothes. Wait until she meets the new you, Claire teased, t-shirt, grass stains and all. The transformation was indeed remarkable. David's wardrobe had evolved from power suits to jeans and polo shirts. His hands, once soft from executive privilege, now bore the honest calluses of weekend projects and garden work. But the deepest changes were invisible the way he listened, without immediately strategizing solutions. The patience he'd developed for 4-year-old logic, the peace he'd found in ordinary moments. Speaking of transformations, Claire continued, reaching into her pocket, I have something for you. She handed him an envelope marked David's first Father's Day gift in Lily's careful preschool handwriting. Inside was a hand-drawn picture showing stick figures labeled Daddy, Mommy, and me holding hands beneath a rainbow. But it was the accompanying note that made his eyes blur with tears. In Claire's neat script, she'd written, thank you for saving our daughter and for letting us save you too. You are the father Lily deserves and the partner I never thought I'd find. Happy first Father's Day to the bravest man I know. Claire, David's voice was thick with emotion. Read the back, she whispered. David flipped the paper over to find a single line in Claire's handwriting. Will you marry me, David Harrison? Time stopped. Lily, sensing something momentous, abandoned her butterfly hunting and ran over to them. Did you ask him yet? Mommy, did you ask him the special question? David stared at Claire, then at Lily, then back at Claire. You were planning this. We were planning this. Lily corrected importantly. It was my idea, but Mommy helped with the words because I can't write everything yet. Claire's cheeks flushed pink. I know it's not traditional for the woman to propose, but nothing about our story has been traditional. You sacrificed your health to save our daughter. You transformed your entire life to become the father and partner we needed. It seemed like I should be the one asking this time. David felt the weight of the moment standing in the garden they'd planted together, surrounded by the life they'd built from crisis and hope. A year ago, he'd been a lonely executive who thought family was a luxury he couldn't afford. Now he was a father, a partner, and a man who understood that love wasn't a hostile takeover but a daily choice to be vulnerable and present. Lily, he said seriously, what do you think? Should I marry your mommy? Yes, Lily shouted, jumping up and down. Then you'll be my forever daddy and not just my DNA daddy. In that case, David said, pulling both his girls into his arms. The answer is absolutely yes. Claire's tears came freely now, and David kissed them away as Lily cheered and the butterfly she'd released circled back to dance around their embrace. I love you both so much, David whispered. You saved me long before I saved anyone else. As if summoned by their joy, guests began arriving. Marcus with his family, Dr. Peterson and her husband, even Mrs. Chen from their old Queens neighborhood. The backyard filled with laughter, conversation, and the beautiful chaos of chosen families celebrating together. Later, as the sun set and Lily fell asleep in David's lap while the adults talked around the fire pit he'd built, Claire leaned against his shoulder. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't called that day? She asked quietly. David considered the question, watching the flames dance in the growing darkness. I think about it sometimes. But then I remember something Lily said last week. What's that? She said butterflies don't worry about the flowers they didn't visit because they're too busy enjoying the ones they found. David's arm tightened around his sleeping daughter. We found each other, Claire. However it happened, we found our way home. Above them, stars began appearing in the clear suburban sky, the same stars that had shone over David's lonely penthouse and Claire's struggling apartment, but which now seemed to sparkle with the promise of shared tomorrows. The phone call that had begun as an angry complaint about cleaning services had indeed cleaned something, sweeping away years of isolation and fear, polishing hearts that had forgotten how to hope, and revealing the brilliant truth that sometimes the best families are the ones we never planned but always needed. In the morning, there would be wedding plans to make and dreams to pursue. But tonight, there was only this: a father, a mother, and their miraculous daughter, surrounded by love and the infinite possibility of forever. The end.